All that you believed about Christine Brown was false. The courtroom was a maelstrom of tacit tension. All eyes within the room were upon Christine Brown as she advanced, her heels clipping sharply against the highly polished wooden floor. The air was dense, nigh on oppressive, and the subtle sound of whispers echoed off the high ceilings. It was a scene no one could have envisioned mere months prior. Christine, who was once the beaming family face, now at the eye of a courtroom tempest, accused of manipulation, betrayal, and dishonesty. Kody Brown sat at the first row, hands clutched on the edge of the bench, jaw clenched. For years, he had been the faithful husband, the patriarch who held his household together, and now he was looking at a reality that he never expected. One of his wives was before a court of law to face serious charges. He could hardly believe that the woman he once trusted more than anyone else in the world was before him, shaking but unbroken, under the unforgiving spotlight of justice. Meri Brown, seated next to him, shifted forward a little, her eyes narrowing. She had been through decades of highs and lows, silences and betrayals in the family. While she and Christine had never had an easy relationship, the allegations before the court were a surprise. Her hand crept up to hover close to her lips as she attempted to get her mind around what she was hearing. A mix of incredulity and slow-building vindication building within her. Janelle Brown's fingers were folded tightly in her lap, knuckles white. She had attempted, for years, to maintain peace within the family, but she could no longer turn a blind eye to the reality unfolding before her eyes. Her quick, logical brain had long suspected Christine's machinations, but witnessing the proof laid out in the courtroom was a different story altogether. Robyn Brown, sitting a little way away, possessed an unobtrusive, strained demeanor. She had her own complex past with Christine and the family, and her eyes wore a compound of relief and censure. Robyn had seen Christine's charm cover her real nature for too long, and now the charade was coming apart. The judge's gavel came down, silencing the tension like a flash of lightning. "Miss Brown," said the judge, his voice firm and authoritative, ringing out across the courtroom, "the evidence presented before us is damning. How do you plead?" Christine's lips trembled, and for a moment she could hardly breathe. Her carefully manufactured public image, the smiling, charming wife who seemed devoted to her family, was erased. She was a vulnerable woman, revealed under the unforgiving glare of the courtroom lights. All her secret movements, all her manipulations, every tiny white lie that had accumulated over the years, were threatening to unravel her entirely. The listeners leaned forward in their seats, aware that the day of reckoning had finally come. Relatives, acquaintances, and even strangers in the public gallery could sense the tension humming in the air. All the secrets Christine had so quietly buried, all the lies she had camouflaged as carefree charm, were now on the brink of being exposed. The air seemed to close in on her, as the murmurs intensified, a low hum of expectation and pronouncement. The prosecutor, a tall, impeccably dressed man with authoritative presence, stood up from his chair. "Your Honor," he announced, voice sharp and measured, "the evidence we have against Miss Christine Brown is ample and irrefutable. Documents, correspondence, and statements of witnesses will uncover a record of lies, manipulation, and treachery." Christine glanced over at Kody, who stared back at her, pain and shock etched across his face. She had spent years carefully constructed in the image she showed him, and to the rest of the family. She had been the devoted wife, the loving mother, the sunny presence within the family unit. But the courtroom was not interested in images. Images were interested in action, and it was action that had gotten her here. The prosecutor went on, striding a little, as he set out the seriousness of it all. "Miss Brown, you were placed in a position of trust by your family. You were a wife, a mother, a trusted figure. But our evidence indicates a calculated sequence of manipulation. Messages kept secret from your family, contact framed to deceive, and behavior which served your purpose at the cost of other people's trust." Meri squirmed uncomfortably in her chair, recollections of subtle manipulations and soft-spoken lies flashing in her memory. She recalled innumerable family meals when Christine had played the mediator while sabotaging others behind the scenes. She recalled situations when decisions were made that did not add up, only to discover later that they were manipulated by Christine for her own gain. Janelle's eyes tightened. She had thought Christine had been lying to her for years, but the cumulative force of the evidence revealed in the courtroom was irrefutable. There was no longer room to doubt. No room to turn away from the pattern that had long gone on record. Each new discovery was like a punch. Each witness statement a hammer blow against the very carefully constructed image Christine had so meticulously created. Robyn remained quiet, hands in her lap. She had never fully trusted Christine, sensing from the outset that her outward demeanor frequently hid a hidden agenda. Now, watching things play out in the open, there was a sick pleasure in seeing the truth revealed at last, though it had a high price for the family. Christine's face was white, her lips shaking. She tried to speak, but her words stuck in her throat. All her carefully practiced defenses, all her explanations, now seemed woefully insufficient. She was confronted not just with the legal facts, but with the emotional truth of having to face the people she had been lying to for years. The courtroom itself appeared to be holding its breath. The judge's gaze was keen, resolute, and fixed. The gavel crashed once more, emphasizing the gravity of the proceedings. "Silence in the courtroom," he ordered. The echoes hung in the air like a threat. This was not a trial. It was a reckoning. Shouts from the crowd became louder as friends, extended family, and even members of the public huddled forward to catch the drama unfolding. The tale of Christine Brown, the wife who had concealed her real intentions behind charms, smiles, and cunning words, was about to be revealed for everyone to see. Kody's fists curled. He had wished for so long that love and loyalty could lead his family past every obstacle. But standing there, observing the woman who was his trust most of all faced with irrefutable evidence of manipulation, he knew certain things could not be overlooked. Certain betrayals could not be forgiven. Meri's eyes glistened with unshed tears. The pain of deception ran deep, the anger sharp. Yet, beneath it all there was a sense of relief that the hidden truths were finally emerging. Janelle and Robyn exchanged brief, tense glances. They knew the coming testimonies and evidence would shake the family to its core. But the truth, however harsh, had to be faced. Christine swallowed hard, resisting panic. For years, she had been the director of smiles, the voice of charm and diplomacy. Now, without the cameras, without the scripted facade, she was simply a woman face to face with the results of her actions. The prosecutor stopped for dramatic effect, allowing the gravity of the opening statement to descend on the room. Today, all the lies, all the deceptions, all the betrayals will be exposed. Miss Brown, the truth can no longer hide. The courtroom grew tight, as if time itself had been slowed. Christine's eyes darted around the room, taking in the faces of those who had once trusted her most, but now filled with hurt, doubt, and anger. The time had come. The secret past could no longer be denied, and the day of reckoning had arrived. The courtroom was charged, the atmosphere thick with expectation. Christine Brown had already heard the judge's opening statement, and now it was the evidence turn to be heard. The prosecutor rose, his stature demanding attention, and slowly placed a wide sheaf of documents on the highly polished wooden table. "Your Honor," he started, voice steady but resolute. "We have several pieces of evidence demonstrating a clear pattern of dishonesty, manipulation, and betrayal by Miss Christine Brown. These are not one-time events. They indicate a calculated, continuous attempt to manipulate, cheat, and mislead those nearest to her." The crowd leaned forward. Kody Brown's jaw clenched, his knuckles white as he held the bench. For years he had believed Christine's charm, trusting in her dedication and loyalty. Now, every choice he had voted for, every second of faith he had put in her, was on the table. Meri Brown shifted uncomfortably in her seat, a scowl forming. She had always suspected Christine, seeing how the smallest manipulations and soft whispers could sway family decisions. Now the whispers had become irrefutable evidence. The weight inside her chest increased as she saw how deep Christine's deceptions extended. The prosecutor started introducing the first evidence, private emails and messages between Christine and people outside the family. Every message showed manipulation, Christine masterminding situations to her benefit, revealing secrets on a need-to-know basis, and playing people against one another. She didn't hide little things, the prosecutor described. She staged things to cause doubt, confusion and dependency, while always keeping up the appearance of loyalty and love. The courtroom gasped as the emails were shown on a giant screen for everyone to witness. One email had Christine intentionally misleading Kody regarding family issues, and another had attempts to exclude Meri from making decisions. Janelle gasped with realization as she saw subtle manipulations she had suspected all along, but had never had evidence of. Robyn, slightly off to the side, ground her jaw. She'd long suspected Christine's manipulative charm, but to have it presented so starkly to everyone was a moment of vindication. The warm, courteous public image Christine had presented was all facade, covering calculated motives. Second, witnesses were brought in. Former members who had once worked for the family, friends, and even extended family members all testified to times when Christine had lied to control circumstances. One witness testified of a family gathering where Christine had quietly manipulated family members against one another, creating tension that only she could mend. Another spoke of how Christine had selectively given Kody information so that he would make decisions favoring her. Every statement was like a blow of a hammer against Christine's well-crafted image. The crowd was silent, and gasps moved through the courtroom. Kody's gaze was on her, his face contorted in disbelief and rage. Each detail reminded him that the woman he had trusted blindly had deceived him again and again, and in ways he could not have dreamed. The prosecutor stood holding the most incriminating evidence, a set of tape-recorded interviews of Christine and friends beyond the family, in which she had confessed lies and deceptions for personal gratification. Her voice on the tapes was assertive, relaxed, and brazenly unremorseful. She talked about her deception like it was a game, the prosecutor told him, allowing the force of the tapes to linger in the air. A game with live players, live feelings, and live trust. And she played it flawlessly. Christine's hands were shaking. She had believed her meticulous planning would safeguard her for good. But now, as recordings, messages, and witness statements piled up against her, she knew she could no longer hide. No smile, no charm, no well-practiced apology could erase the trail of treachery she had left behind. Meri's eyes glistened with a mix of sorrow and vindication. For years she had tried to maintain her own dignity, often staying silent when Christine manipulated situations to her disadvantage. Now she finally had the proof she needed, and though painful, there was a grim satisfaction in seeing the truth revealed. Janelle spoke, leaning forward, her fingers interlocked tightly. She was always careful, always observing the family dynamics. It was this same observation that confirmed long-held suspicions. Christine's manipulations were not incidents. No, they were strategic, consistent, and intentional. Robyn's face was stoic, nearly frigid. She had watched Christine all these years, sensing the dishonesty beneath her veneer, and now it could not be denied. The quiet, lovely wife everyone had loved was revealed, and her true character was there for the world to witness. Even Kody, usually composed, struggled to contain his emotions. He had trusted Christine, believed in her, and allowed her influence over family decisions. Now, seeing the evidence, he realized how deeply he had been deceived. The betrayal was personal, emotional, and painful, cutting through years of trust and love. The prosecutor concluded this section of the evidence presentation with a stern admonition. Miss Brown, these are not mere mistakes or misconceptions. They are intentional acts with the aim of manipulating and deceiving others around you. Today, the truth is no longer concealed, and justice will not be overlooked. Christine's shoulders dipped, and she looked down. The room seemed to shut in around her. For all those years, she had been the puppet master, the manipulator behind the curtains. Now, without the cover, before undeniable evidence, she stood exposed, vulnerable, and alone in the court. The public breathed in unison. The first day of the trial had uncovered Christine's deception in stark, unblinking honesty. Relatives, friends, and the public reeled, and Christine herself was left to confront the repercussions of a lifetime's camouflage lies. The air was charged. All eyes in the courtroom were on Christine. Every rumor rang with shock, betrayal, and condemnation. The setting was ready for round 2 of disclosures, and the spectators understood that this was just the start. The courtroom was hushed as Christine Brown stood up slowly to address the court. Her hands shook just a little, and her normally poised, self-assured attitude was nowhere to be found. Gone too was the beaming wife who had beguiled the cameras and her relatives as much as anyone else. Now she was simply a woman standing accountable for decades of deceit, laid bare in front of those who had once believed her most. The judge's eyes were hard, awaiting. "Miss Brown, you may speak to the court," he informed. Christine breathed deeply, her voice shaking as she started. "Your Honor, I never intended to hurt anyone." She swallowed hard, looking at Kody, who stiffened in the front row. "I believed I was doing something for the good of the family. I believed I was keeping everyone safe. I wanted to be happy. And I figured, maybe this was the way." Her eyes flicked to Meri, whose stare was icy, a mixture of disbelief and resentment. For years Meri had endured Christine's subtle manipulations and witnessed moments where trust had been broken. Meri's lips pressed into a thin line, and for a moment she considered standing up, but she stayed silent, letting the court do the judging. Janelle leaned forward, folding her arms. She had always been one to notice everything, breaking down every exchange in the family. Watching Christine try and defend herself here seemed almost unreal. The woman who had staged so many of those moments of manipulation was now trying to stand as a victim. But the proof had already spoken more loudly than any words ever could. Robyn sat quietly, her face expressionless. She had long believed Christine was untrustworthy, and now listening to her impassioned apology, there was no question. Christine was trapped. Her carefully constructed facade was disintegrating, leaving bare desperation and vulnerability. The prosecutor rose to his feet, shaking his head minutely. "Miss Brown, this isn't about intentions," he declared forcefully. "This is about actions. Your decisions, your deceptions, and your manipulations have done real harm. The individuals that you say you love and care for have been repeatedly deceived by you. Your intentions don't annul the effects of your actions." Christine's voice shook, tears flowing down her cheeks. "I didn't realize it would come to this. I believed that I could make it right, that I could please everyone, including myself. I never intended to hurt anyone." The courtroom fell silent, as if each word weighed too heavily in the atmosphere. Kody's face was impassive, a blend of fury, disappointment, and sadness. He had trusted Christine for years, trusted her loyalty, and now that faith was broken on the hardwood floor of the courtroom. Meri's eyes did not blink. "Your Honor," she stated softly but clearly, "it's not about whether she intended to harm anyone. It's about the fact that she did. Her deceptions and manipulations have brought years of anguish, confusion, and fragmentation. That is the reality we live with, courtesy of Christine Brown." Christine clasped the podium with white knuckles. She attempted to hold on, to cling to some semblance of dignity, but every statement of testimony, every shred of evidence, was crushing her. She had played puppet master, the orchestrator of many of the tensions within the family, and now the puppets were turning on her. The prosecutor sat forward, his words measured. "Miss Brown, you can talk about intentions and joy, but actions have consequences. Each manipulated conversation, each concealment of the truth, each lie, it all culminated here. And the family, the people who trusted you, they're the victims." Christine's gaze turned to Janelle and Robyn. She sought sympathy, a look of understanding, but saw only faces sharpened by years of distrust and disillusionment. Her charm had no force here. Her voice cracked as she whispered, I just wanted to be loved. I just wanted to belong, to matter." The judge leaned forward, speaking firmly, piercing the tension. "Miss Brown, to desire is not to justify actions that betray trust. The court can understand your feelings, but feelings alone cannot repair the damage." The courtroom seemed to be frozen in that instant. Christine, who had been a presence of control and charm, was now revealed as vulnerable and impotent. Her defense, Her words, her efforts to try to tell her side of things, all paled before the mounting evidence of her betrayals. Meri, Janelle, Robyn, and even Kody looked at her silently in judgment, their faces registering a mix of incredulity, outrage, and sadness. This was the Christine Brown they had shared a life with over the years, manipulative, deceptive, yet human in her fear and desperation. The dual nature of her personality made the courtroom soap opera that much more interesting. A woman who could evoke love and trust, yet hide deceit and betrayal so skillfully. The prosecutor summed up with a last remark, allowing the weight of the day to settle. Your actions cannot be reversed, Miss Brown. Well, today, the truth is out, and the price is yours to pay. Christine lowered her head, the tears flowing freely. She had attempted to justify herself, to explain, to humanize what she had done. But the court, the family, and the evidence were implacable. She knew, in this moment, that charm, smiles, and studied manipulation were no match for the beam of truth. The crowd remained in shocked silence. The effective defense had exposed Christine's vulnerability, but it made one undeniable reality clear as well. The betrayal was not just imagined, and the repercussions were unavoidable. The courtroom was charged with tension. Everyone in the room appeared to be holding their breath as the prosecutor stood ready to unveil the most incriminating facts against Christine Brown. This was the time when years of secret deception, manipulation, and treachery would come tumbling into the open, giving no chance for charm or apologies. Kody Brown sat forward, jaw set, fists clenched. He had trusted Christine, believed in her, supported her publicly. Now he could sense the gravity of every manipulated exchange, every falsehood she had spoken, bearing down on him. The man who had always appeared patient and in control was clearly shaken. Meri Brown's eyes narrowed. She had endured Christine's subtle manipulations for years, always sensing that something wasn't right. But now the truth was being laid bare for all to see. Each revelation struck her like a lightning bolt, proof that her instincts had been correct all along. Janelle's hands gripped each other tightly as she leaned forward, her heart pounding in her chest. She had suspected Christine of lying, but nothing could have prepared her for the extent of the manipulations about to be revealed. Each measured action, each carefully delivered falsehood, would soon be irrevocable. Robyn sat a little back, slowly exhaling. She had intuited Christine's dishonesty for years, and had kept a watchful distance. Now, seeing the proof, she felt grim satisfaction. Christine's carefully constructed public image, the smiling, charming, apparently devoted wife, was disintegrating in real time before everyone's eyes. The prosecutor started with the first bombshell. Miss Brown, he told her, these emails, texts, and recorded calls demonstrate a clear intent to manipulate within the family. You lied to Kody about important decisions, misled Meri with false information, and undercut Janelle and Robyn to serve your own interests. The courtroom was filled with gasps. Christine paled as the prosecutor displayed screenshots and transcripts on the courtroom monitor. Secret messages she had sent, discussions she had manipulated to manipulate results, and undercover interactions created to make family members fight each other were revealed. She manipulated the family dynamic for years. The prosecutor went on. She instilled distrust, confusion, and tension, all while acting as the peacemaker. Her charm was a tool, her smiles a mask for calculated deceit. Christine's hands trembled at the podium as the evidence was laid out. The tapes were incriminating, her own voice confessing strategies of manipulation, her tone light, nearly playful, like it was a game. She had believed no one would ever hear it, but now it was playing in front of the world for judgment. Meri's eyes filled with a mix of sorrow and vindication. For years she had endured Christine's subtle schemes, often suppressing her own frustration to maintain family harmony. Now she could finally witness the truth openly, even if it was painful to see her own family so fractured. Janelle's jaw clenched. All the evidence attested to her suspicions. Christine's behavior was not isolated errors. It was calculated, strategic, and consistent. Every whispered deception, Every partial truth spoken to family members was now on record for everyone to read. Robyn's face was inscrutable, but in her heart, she felt a burst of verification. Christine always appeared polished, sunny, and charming, but the evidence exposed her calculated deceit. The public image that she had kept up for so long was broken. The prosecutor paused, letting the weight of the revelations settle over the room. "Miss Brown," he said, voice sharp, "your actions were not accidental. They were deliberate, and they have caused deep emotional harm to your family. The deception cannot be undone, and the consequences are now yours to face." Christine dropped her head, her tears flowing unself-consciously. The disguise she had maintained for so long had tumbled, leaving her raw and unprotected to inspection, judgment, and irrefutable proof. She had manipulated her own story, but now her story had fallen apart completely. The crowd buzzed, some in shock, others in disbelief. Kody gazed down, struggling to comprehend the deception. He had always thought about unity, love, and trust, and now he stood before the cruel reality of Christine's manipulation. Meri's hands clenched in her lap. She had silently endured years of deception, and now the courtroom confirmed everything she had feared. The pain was sharp, but there was also a strange sense of closure, proof that the reality she had long suspected was finally undeniable. Janelle's eyes sparkled with determination. She understood the family would never be the same. But the truth, no matter how difficult, had to be revealed. Christine's charm, once so effective, had been removed, and a harsh and unpleasant reality lay exposed. Robyn sighed. She had kept her distance, been cautious and suspicious of Christine all along. Now, seeing the full extent of the manipulation, she was vindicated. But then there was regret. Families are complicated, and broken trust is hard if not impossible to mend. The judge leaned forward, his gaze fixed on Christine. "Miss Brown," he said, voice firm but solemn, "the court has now seen the evidence. The testimony, the papers, the recordings, all of it speaks of intentional deceit. This is not about errors or misconception. This is about intentional moves that damaged the people who trusted you." Christine's shoulders trembled. She knew, finally, the enormity of what she had done. The courtroom, once a territory she had fancied she could charm, was now the site of her judgment. All the lies, all the manipulations, all the betrayals, had brought her to this, and there was no avoiding the truth. The audience was overwhelmed by the gravity of the moment. All the whispered gossip, all the backdoor secrets, all the clandestine manipulations had been laid bare. Christine's artfully built universe of charm and deceit had collapsed, leaving a harsh and naked truth. The prosecutor finished, his voice ringing out in the serious courtroom. His voice ringing out in the serious courtroom. The court, the family, and the public now know the truth. "Miss Brown, the time to hide is through. Evidence proves itself, and justice cannot turn a blind eye." Christine's tears streamed freely, but the emotional shock of the courtroom had already taken hold. She had sought to manage perceptions, manipulate circumstances, and guard her own reputation, but now she was helpless. The truth was inexorable. The tapestry of deceptions she had woven for years at last had been pulled apart. The courtroom was silent with shock, each individual watching, consuming the full implications of Christine Brown's action. Friends, family, and even bystanders knew this was not just about a court case. It was about emotional accountability. A woman who once appeared to be above the law now faced the reality of years of manipulation, betrayal, and dishonesty. The suspense was unbearable, the stakes unbelievably high, and everyone knew the last session would determine not only Christine's fate, but the very destiny of the Brown family itself. The court was still, practically painfully so. All eyes were on Christine Brown, the woman who once had held everyone's attention with her smile and charm, now shaking under the power of exposed deception. The atmosphere was heavy, as if the walls themselves were restraining their breath in expectation. Kody Brown sat in the front row, his expression a compound of anger, heartbreak, and disbelief. The man who had trusted Christine, trusted her without question, and had lived years of family life with her now
had to confront the truth that most of that trust had been broken. Each manipulated conversation, every concealed truth, every calculated act of betrayal, had brought him to this point. Meri Brown's eyes were keen and unflinching. She had suffered years of lies, veiled manipulations, and instances where Christine's real motives had brought on confusion and heartache. Now finally, the truth was revealed, irrefutable and stark. A sense of justice ran through her, but it was balanced by the sorrow of witnessing her family torn apart so severely. Janelle leaned forward, her fingers tightly laced. She had long suspected Christine's deception. But courtroom revelations attested to the extent and nature of her manipulations. The carefully built veneer Christine had sustained for so long was utterly destroyed, exposing a truth that was both terrible and painful. Robyn's eyes were tranquil, bordering on chilly. She had never trusted Christine, perceiving a secret agenda behind the surface allure. Now seeing the proof, she was vindicated. But the pain of watching the family disintegrate was unavoidable. The judge leaned forward, his voice firm, with a weight that dominated the courtroom. Miss Brown, the court has reviewed the evidence, testimonies, and documents before it. Your actions have caused hurt, discord, and emotional distress among your family. The court believes that your manipulations and deceptions are intentional, planned, and irrefutable.
Christine's hands trembled as she clutched the podium. Tears flowed down her face, but the room was chillier than ever. For years, she had used charm, smiles, and scrupulous control to guide the intricate games of her family. Now, bereft of every disguise, she was naked and impotent. The voice of the prosecutor pierced the charged silence. The proof is in, Miss Brown. The time for apologies, rationalization, and charm is over. The destiny of your choices is evident, and the truth will no longer be concealed. Christine's eyes darted to Kody, her expression begging for comprehension, for some indication of forgiveness. But Kody's countenance was a tempest of mixed feelings: anger, disappointment, hurt, and disbelief. He had thought that love, commitment, and faithfulness existed, and now all those pillars had been destroyed. Meri's voice shattered the silence, soft but piercing. For years we were taken advantage of, lied to, and cheated. Your charm might have deceived other people, but never me. Today the truth is evident, and we cannot deny it. Janelle's eyes sparkled with a combination of grief and determination. Christine, this is not hatred. It is about truth. The family has the right to know the truth. And now we do. Robyn's face was resolute, near stoic. Sickly, she had long been wary of Christine's insincerity, and had been watchful. Now, witnessing the extent of the deception, she knew the family would never again have the blind trust they once did. Christine's words trembled as she barely breathed. I just wanted to belong, to matter, to be loved. The judge's eyes softened a little, but his voice was stern. Intention to desire does not wash away actions, Miss Brown. The court understands the humane aspect of your feelings, but the reality of your manipulations has concrete effects. Trust has been damaged, and responsibility must ensue. Tears flowed down the cheeks of Christine as she gazed at the faces of her relatives. The room was filled with judgment, heartbreak, and epiphany. She had lied behind smiles for years, but the truth had finally caught up. Charm, manipulation, and deceit had all fallen apart, leaving a naked, exposed reality. The crowd whispered, some shocked, others incredulous. The courtroom drama had reached its peak. Christine's well-crafted image was no more, replaced with vulnerability, remorse, and the palpable burden of the truth. The narrator's words reverberated in the minds of everyone present. Some things can't be kept hidden forever. Some lies, no matter how well they are invented, always see the light of day. And when they do, the world gets to see who you are. Christine's shoulders drooped, the burden of years of lies finally coming home to roost. She had attempted to dominate the story, manage the perceptions of others, and guard her own reputation. But the court had exposed what no charm could hide: the reality. The judge's gavel came down for the last time, and the session ended. The courtroom emptied, but Christine was left to confront the consequence of her actions. The Brown family, torn asunder by lies, now had illumination, but at a deep cost. Kody sat for a moment longer, taking in the emotional ruin. Meri, Janelle and Robyn shared silent, significant looks. The family was forever altered. Christine's deceptions had come to light, and there was no returning. In the quiet aftermath, there was one thing that was sure: the truth, although hurtful, was finally out. And in it, the world realized Christine Brown for what she really was: a woman whose beauty and smile could no longer hide the lies she had woven for so long.